while, the whole climate change debate, environmental issues growing, pollution. So I've always felt very strongly about it, and I've been watching very carefully what others have been doing. And for me, over the last few years,
Children from two very different royal families were brought together for what insiders characterized as a family bonding occasion. It all started off as a pleasant royal ritual, which took place on a peaceful Sunday afternoon on the grounds of Windsor. The youngest attendants included Prince George, who was maturing into his role as heir with subtle authority and quiet composure. He was one of the youngest people present. He had previously participated in events of this like, and his mother, Princess Catherine, had always kept a watchful eye on him every time. However, this time was not the same as the previous one. What started out as a pleasant interaction between cousins and step-cousins quickly escalated into a more serious situation. Soon after, rumors began to circulate around the palace. Prince George had been bullied, and the person responsible for it was none other than one of Camilla's grandsons. The youngster in issue, who descends from Camilla's Parker Bowles family, was not yet a member of the royal family. Nonetheless, Camilla had been working relentlessly behind the scenes to enhance publicity for her family. The modest title, affiliations, prestigious education, and even the smallest ceremonial positions were all things that she had battled for. However, the great majority of members of the royal family kept silent until recently, when Prince George walked home in tears. Everything changed. Even while some members of the royal family secretly complained about her efforts and called them overreaching, the vast majority of them. When Kate first noticed the watery eyes, the stillness, and the stoop in his shoulders, she was the first to notice them. She was curious about what had transpired, and George responded by explaining in the most forthright manner that a toddler can, that the teasing had been more than just a matter of personal preference. The action had been planned out. A youngster who had heard too many adult murmurs at home turned nasty and insulted his habits, and his family and even his late grandmother, Diana Kate, were unhappy. According to palace sources, his role as the future king was ridiculed. His family was also furious. William was utterly heartbroken. The line that was waiting behind the royal gates had been traversed. Everything that took place was sudden, unobtrusive, and explosive. It was a decision that Prince William made that would have far-reaching repercussions for the history of the royal family. The grandchild of Camilla, who was supposed to be elevated to the position of honorary member of the royal family, would be deprived of any future titles, consideration, and there would be no further discussion. Not only is there no gradual incorporation into royal events, but there are also no second chances. Internally, the palace has decided against issuing a public statement from the palace. On the other hand, the walls are trembling. It is believed that Camilla feels incensed by this. Charles has maintained a hands-off posture, which some people believe says a lot, thanks to the fact that he has shared his time between his wife and his child. How about the general public? They are keeping a close eye on everything that is going on, reading between the lines and making choices, because under a monarchy that is based on lineage, there is nothing more important than ensuring the survival of the next generation. To add insult to injury, Prince George was not only protected this time, his vengeance ensued. One of those contrived royal family days, the purpose of which was to remind the press and the general public that beneath all the jewels and formality, the Windsors are just like any other family. The event was supposed to be a lighthearted and feel-good affair. Balmorals, which are distinguished private grounds, served as the location. The location was very stunning. Soft tartan blankets had been strewn out on the grass in preparation for a large picnic that had been set up. In the presence of their parents and nannies, golden corgis are seen leaping around, and royal children are seen running between activities and enjoying their meals. However, nobody could have imagined how severely everything would fall apart, and no royal assistance could have prevented it. According to King Charles, who considered that it was time to correct defects that were not obvious on the surface. The day had been organized by King Charles himself. The queen consort was eager to further incorporate her lineage into the spotlight of the royal family, and he believed that bringing together Prince William's children and Camilla's grandchildren in a casual atmosphere would provide the opportunity to build a deeper relationship between them. He enthusiastically consented, and she considered the get-together to be more than just a picnic. Her family was able to be seen, acknowledged, and even cherished as a result of this understated power maneuver. However, not everyone was in agreement with that concept. It was later reported by royal aides that Princess Catherine had been hesitant from the beginning. Despite the fact that she is well known for her diplomatic skills, sources claim that she was not pleased with the prospect of her children, notably Prince George, being forced to interact with Camilla's children, who are more outspoken. When all was said and done, George was being brought up with the responsibility of a future monarch. Unlike Camilla's extended relatives, who grew up in more informal environments and apparently had far fewer limits, he was taught humility, honor, and duty from a young age. However, this was not the case for Camilla's extended cousins. The trouble started in the middle of the afternoon, during the time when the parents were enjoying tea under a marquee tent. The children were encouraged to compete against one another in A. When there was a lack of supervision in the garden area, a handmade football game turned into a terrible game. Words were traded, and then things took a more sinister turn. According to a number of accounts, Camilla's eldest grandson started torturing George, initially because of the game and then because of personal worries. How come you are walking in such a manner? Are you under the impression that you are superior to everyone else because of your foolish crown? This question was overheard by a toddler. The behavior that was initially thought to be juvenile taunting turned out to be something even more awful. It has been reported that Prince George, who had recently turned 11, made an attempt to flee, but he was pursued, mocked for his special training status as the chosen one, and even referred to as a mummy's boy, as stated by an assistant who later briefed a senior staff member. This was a sensitive trigger for a child whose late grandmother, Princess Diana, is treated almost as a sacred memory. However, despite the rapid actions taken by the staff to remove the children, the damage had already been done. George was shaken, despite the fact that he had the ability to keep his cool in public situations. In order to avoid the attention of the media, a family bodyguard was dispatched to remove him from the scene in a stealthy manner. Catherine was informed that her kid was already crying in the car when she received the news. The remainder of the afternoon was characterized by awkward smiles and talks that were forced upon them. Camilla proceeded to fulfill her hosting responsibilities with the assumption that she was either unaware of the full gravity of what had occurred or that she preferred not to acknowledge it. On the other hand, Catherine's close acquaintances have reported that she appeared to be stone-faced, that her smiles were wan, and that she had a stronger grip on Charlotte's hand than usual. After they had returned to their private room, Kate demanded that George provide her with a comprehensive accounting, and the information that she received left her speechless. The bullying was not merely malicious, rather it was precise and perhaps purposeful, imitating the words and emotions of adults. This suggests that Camilla's grandson was mimicking what he had heard at home. One of the things that horrified Kate the most was not only the cruelty of children, but also the poison of adult prejudice that was passed down through whispers and glances down the generations. I quickly briefed Prince William on the situation. As George went to bed early, his eyes were red and he became more reserved. William sat quietly next to his wife all the while. It was not just George who was experiencing the ache on his face. This time, however, he would not remain silent. It was the old ache of history repeating itself over and over again. Consequences would be incurred this time around. At this point, he was resolute in his commitment to defend his son at any cost. On that particular evening, the anxiety was evident as the automobile approached the cottage that belonged to Adelaide. Following his departure from Balmoral, Prince George had not made any statements. His demeanor, which was typically a display of courtesy, was suddenly loaded with something else, and that something was embarrassment about him. Kate sat George aside away from royal servants and watchful eyes and asked him in a gentle manner, "Tell me exactly what happened, what transpired next?" Princess Catherine patiently sat next to him, her hand gently resting on his back. Her maternal instincts were triggered all at once, a broken heart for her, the name calling, the ridiculing, the snarky remark about his father being a future puppet king, and the ugly accusation that he was only adored for his rank were all things that George revealed to his mother, who listened closely. At first, George explained those things with a hesitant voice, but later he did so with confidence. To make matters even worse, the name of Princess Diana was joked about and spewed forth like a joke. The expression on Kate's face changed, and her eyes, which were normally calm and composed, became cold with rage. This was not the explosive fury that one might picture, but rather the terrifying, steel-backed rage of a mother whose child had been emotionally injured. As stated by a high-ranking royal advisor, Kate's remarks were clear and unambiguous, and she made it clear that she meant for that boy to never again be in close proximity to her children. Years had passed during which Kate had been subjected to the institution's covert pressure. She was able to gracefully negotiate the royal system, maintain a smile in the face of scandal, and be patient while Camilla's family was brought closer to the center of the monarchy. However, this went beyond what any mother would be able to tolerate, let alone a possible queen. The chat that she had with William about what had occurred beyond the walls of Adelaide Cottage was, according to a reliable insider, the most emotionally charged conversation that the couple had shared in years. She broke the news to William within an hour. Kate did not tear up. The volume of her voice was not raised. On the other hand, she made it quite plain that she would take action in the event that William did not. When she brought up Diana, she reminded him of how the institution had let her down and how seemingly insignificant problems had become catastrophic over time. George is not going to have the experience of growing up in his own family feeling frightened. Allegedly, she made the statement, "You are the heir. Begin to put on an act of it." While William was listening, he concurred. After that, Kate declined all of the engagements that she had already scheduled for the sake of a silent protest behind the scenes. She stayed at home with George and Charlotte, and she canceled her appointments. She made one demand of Palisades, which was that she wanted this to be videotaped. A written record of what had taken place was something that she desired, one that was not reworded, not spun, and not thrown under the rug. The following morning, Charles received a note that had been delivered to him. Secretary of Charles's private office. In light of the fact that there has been an incident involving Prince George, the Prince and Princess of Wales have requested a private audience with His Majesty. The meeting was brief and to the point. The meeting took place within 24 hours, during which time King Charles offered his condolences. In response to the question of whether or not her grandson would be disciplined, Camilla reportedly laughed it off and dismissed the entire affair as nothing more than childish squabbling. Those are just little youngsters. They won't remember this in a week's time. Allegedly, she stated that Kate did not respond to her. It was not necessary for her to do so because her stern, unwavering gaze and firm hold on George's destiny indicated everything that the palace required to know. She had expanded her role beyond that of the Princess of Wales. Due to the fact that she was a mother, the argument had suddenly become more personal. In spite of the fact that Prince William had spent a significant portion of his childhood walking a tight line between reverence for the crown and loyalty to his father, he was constantly haunted by the tragic legacy that his mother had left behind. When it came to his own son, however, there was no place for discussion or consideration. There is no diplomatic effort. There is no reason to defer to the established procedure. Something had shifted within him. When he returned to Kensington Palace the day following his private audience with King Charles William, he made a decision that even his closest advisors were taken aback by. Having collected his top team, he paced the floor of his private study before making the announcement that Camilla's grandson would not acquire a royal title. Not at this time, not at any time in the future. This brings us to a conclusion that there was no discussion, that there is no royal committee, and that there is no mediation took place. Not only was William's choice to take leadership of the situation noteworthy, but the fact that he did so without first receiving consent from Charles or the palace machine was also a significant factor in the significance of the move. Throughout the years, Camilla has been working to bring her children and grandchildren closer to the legitimacy of the royal family. For years, William had been quietly requesting honorary positions, public recognition, and a subtle role in official events. The general populace had not witnessed the slow incursion that William had been making, and now with George being harmed and Camilla trying to deflect blame, he is facing the consequences of his actions. The fact that it was a blatant attempt to involve her family into the future of the monarchy was something that he recognized for what it was. William didn't find that to be acceptable. It was clear that the young boy who made fun of George was more than just a naughty child. With Camilla's use of her position in the royal family, taking advantage of Charles's guilt, exploiting his age, and blurring the
limits between duty and favoritism, William's message was clear and concise. He was the embodiment of all that was wrong with Camilla's actions. It is not possible to inherit royal privilege by proximity. Respect, service, and most importantly, honor are the means by which people achieve it. When one of the prince's aides tentatively inquired if a private apology from Camilla's family might soothe the situation, William responded in a cruel manner, "My son does not require an apology." This was described as a chilly tone by an insider who is close to the prince. It is necessary to be protected. After that, he took an even more adamant attitude, stating that Camilla's grandson would no longer be permitted to attend any future family events that included his own children, not even on holidays or for birthdays. During the Trooping the Color performance, there will be no rehearsals. In the event that George, Charlotte, or Louis were there, Camilla's grandson would not be present. This was not a negotiation process. It was a last-ditch request. Almost immediately, word spread throughout the royal communities. As soon as Charles found out about his son's choice, he was taken aback and allegedly paced his study in silence. He had assumed that the circumstance would turn out to be unremarkable. The most distressing aspect of the situation was that William, who is always calm and agreeable, had drawn a line, and he did not flinch when he was confronted with it. William thought of this as more than just a matter of discipline. Control was the focal point, and the message that needed to be communicated was not only to Camilla, but to the entire organization as well. It is no longer acceptable to hide conflicts in the name of unity. Those days are past. No longer would he tolerate disrespect for Diana's legacy or for his own children. Those days were officially over. He had patience for a number of years. However, when George became more prominent in the public eye, William made it very clear that he would act as a shield, a lion, and a father first, and a future monarch second. He also made it clear that no kid linked to Camilla, regardless of how close they may appear to be to the throne, would ever wear a royal title while he was in charge of them. At first, Camilla could not believe the news. While she was enjoying her afternoon tea in the private drawing room of Clarence House, she was informed of the situation in a low-key manner by a senior member of the staff. Not only had Prince William refused to bestow the honorary title onto her grandson, but he had also prohibited him from attending royal family events that involved his children. There was a fluctuation in the temperature of the room. At first, Camilla thought it was a misunderstanding between the two of them. That is not possible at all. The reality hit her like a ton of bricks when the full set of facts became clear, including William's direct contact with the king, his refusal to accept apologies, and his formal record of the occurrence. She exclaimed in a strong voice that Charles would never permit it. It was her hands. She shook as she set the teacup down on the table. It's no longer acceptable. When Camilla responded, she was hardly able to contain her anger. It is a vengeful and personal act. There is no fairness in this. The punishment is this. Camilla was concerned about more than just the manner in which her grandson behaved. The long and difficult battles that she had fought to make her family feel like they were a part of the monarchy were the subject of this legacy. Due to the fact that she had married Charles, her children and grandchildren were not allowed to have any contact with the royal family. They were not considered to be part of the royal family. Rather, they were members of the general public. It was something that she had come to terms with up until this point, and she had worked hard over the years to fit them into the royal rhythm of a parade. The offer to attend a Jubilee performance, the invitation to attend an honorary school, and the covert positioning for public visibility are all examples of this. Although not officially sanctioned, it was done on purpose. In order to demonstrate that the Parker Bowles name was significant and that her family was more than just baggage, she desired for history to demonstrate this. It was an essential component of the destiny of the crown. And now, with a single decisive move, William had shattered that fantasy. Camilla was eager to have a meeting with Charles as soon as possible. She is said to have burst into his study while carrying the letter that William had given through official procedures. Her voice, which was unheard of in the palace, reverberated all the way down the corridor. He made us feel ashamed. I was humiliated by him. This is a child, Charles, a youngster, but Charles, who was worn out and more fragile as a result of the limits of rule, did not provide her with total support. The people who are closest to the monarch claim that he is conflicted. Without a doubt, he felt compassion for Camilla, but he was also aware of the greater picture. In addition to establishing his power as a son, William was also establishing his authority as the next ruler. In addition, Charles, whose leadership was already plagued by public suspicion, could not afford to have another fight with his heir. Something that Camilla did not want to hear was conveyed to her by him. "I am not going to agree with him," Charles responded in a soft voice. His duty is to ensure the safety of his close family members. The purportedly pale appearance of Camilla's face is something that we must respect. She canceled her public appearance that evening, citing a migraine, which nobody believed, and she did so by turning on her heel, leaving the room and slamming the door. This was an extraordinary break of procedure that astonished the staff that was there. A number of people who are close to her assert that she did not make any statements during the meal and that she refused to acknowledge William's name. Despite this, the anger had not subsided. Simply put, it had relocated to underground. This is something that she will never forget. It has been reported that a high-ranking official at the palace has remarked that Camilla may smile in public, but behind the scenes a line has been crossed. Instead of viewing William as her stepson, she now views him as a potential danger. In a single shot, William had demonstrated something that was devastating, despite the fact that Camilla had spent decades carefully playing the long game. After the game was over, she was defeated. Many people believe that Prince George, the young boy who used to hold his father's hand at royal engagements while smiling awkwardly in front of the cameras, is the future of the monarchy's dignity, resilience, and elegance. This is because the British public has traditionally had a strong emotional attachment to the royal family's offspring, particularly those who are in direct line to the throne. Above all else, Prince George has captivated hearts in a manner that few others have. In light of this, the public's attention abruptly moved to the palace when it was first brought to light that George and Camilla's grandson had been involved in a frightening incident earlier. Although they were careful not to breach procedure, the tabloids started dropping hints, and it was evident that they had been informed by inside sources. Not only were headlines such as "Royal Rift Behind Closed Doors" and "Heir Targeted During Private Family Events" sufficient to pique interest, but it didn't take long before the pieces began to fall into place. The title that followed was "Prince George, mocked by step-relative William, responds with title ban." This information was published on Flashpoint. Over the course of a few hours, the story erupted. Discussion boards for the royal family, Twitter threads, and comment sections on Facebook were flooded with expressions of grief for George and anger directed at those who supported Camilla. Thousands of further comments poured in, many of which conveyed the same sentiment: that William should be commended, that the boy should be protected, and that Diana would be proud. The irony that Camilla, who was previously accused of driving the royal family apart, now had a grandson who had crossed a similar line, and that Diana's grandson bore the repercussions, was brought to the attention of some observers, who even made the connection openly. The expression "Team George" became popular on several social media platforms. Drawings were donated by artists depicting a young prince who was wearing a miniature crown, with a calm and proud expression. According to a message that was widely disseminated, George is more imperial at the age of 11 than many adults will ever be. This has nothing to do with genetics. It pertains to one's behavior. Not only that, but royal specialists took notice. During an appearance on a morning television program, a former press secretary at the palace stated that this was a pivotal moment for Prince William. Because he placed a higher priority on his family than on politics, the public has responded with an overwhelming amount of support behind him. There was a noticeable change that was observed by royal aides behind the scenes. Camilla had previously experienced a period of tepid public acceptance, notably after the late Queen's attempt to soften her image as Queen Consort. Nevertheless, this goodwill began to wane as time went on. The popularity of Camilla had a significant decline in polls within a week of the news article being published. While everything was going on, William and Kate's numbers quickly increased. In a stunning turn of events, the public, which had previously shown a protective attitude toward Kate and her children, viewed them as victims of unfair treatment and as winners for standing up for themselves. Even within the palace, there was a considerable support for the senior courtiers of the Wales. Many of these courtiers had served during Diana's reign, and they quietly indicated their support for William's activities. It is necessary for the monarchy to have this. Kate received emails from parents all around the United Kingdom, sharing stories about their own children being abused and congratulating her for defending her child. One advisor allegedly noted that she is someone who is strong in boundaries and who refuses to allow tradition explain terrible behavior. She shed tears as a result of some of the messages. The audience exploded in spontaneous applause as William, Kate, George, and Charlotte stepped out of the automobile for a modest Sunday church appearance a week later. This was the moment that had the greatest influence on the audience. In addition to being friendly, informed, and respectful, it was not distracting or dramatic. Despite the fact that Prince George did not entirely understand the gesture, Kate did. As she leaned down, she gently squeezed his hand and whispered something that the cameras were unable to pick up on. The fact that people were obviously watching was the most important thing. There was no doubt that they were on his side. Throughout the decades and lengthy history of the British monarchy, numerous fights have been fought clandestinely, behind golden doors, behind the weight of convention, and in the shadow of history. These conflicts have been waged against one another. Nevertheless, something seemed to be different this time. This was not a disagreement on the protocol or the policy. This was personal, and in protecting his son, Prince William created a line that no subsequent monarch has dared to cross so publicly. Camilla had spent years attempting to modify public perception, bring her family closer to the throne, and rewrite the past she had originally attempted to distance herself from. But all that meticulous maneuvering came undone in a couple of days, not because of politics or scandal, but because a child was injured. The mother and father of the child refused to keep quiet about the situation. Kate maintained her upright stance with ease. In spite of his young, George now carries a silent victory. That is a clear message that his family will always defend him. William behaved with conviction, and George now bears a silent victory. This monarchy is undergoing change. It has been decided that titles will no longer be released through back channels. No longer will silence be the price that must be paid for peace. It is not in traditions or rituals that have been practiced for generations that the future of the throne lies. Rather, it is in integrity, which Prince William has demonstrated he is willing to maintain at any cost. The ramifications of one moment, one harsh interaction have reverberated throughout the kingdom like a thunderstorm. Camilla, who had previously been quietly gaining ground, is now more isolated than she has ever been. Her grandson's place in the royal spotlight has been removed, and the future prospects of the Parker Bowles family have been diminished. Even though the dust is still settling, there is one fact that cannot be denied in the midst of the silence. A new royal standard has been established. It is necessary to obtain titles. Respect ought to be reciprocal. When it comes to the heirs of the crown, there are no second chances. This was not merely a debate inside the family. Rather, it was a redefinition of power, and it was drawn without the use of swords or speeches, but rather with the voice of a father and the will of a mother. Furthermore, from this point on, the monarchy will never again be the same.